Hello and welcome to the Voices of Veterans podcast. My name is Dan Hamilton. As always, the Voices of Veterans podcast and the Veterans of Voices program is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush at the Veterans Land Board. Today I have a great opportunity to sit down with a friend of mine. We were doing a little reminiscing. I think we've known each other for about 5 years, and Austin played a really instrumental role when I was president of the Student Veterans Association, getting me integrated into the veterans community here in Austin as well as the rest of Texas. So one, I want to thank you for that. But I know you have had long-term involvement, service to the military, and then continued service in veterans circles in Texas.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your background before we get started.
Well, I did what a lot of people our age, you're trying to figure out if college is a path or military service. I tried college, realized military was probably something that I needed, and I joined at 18. I had my 19th birthday in basic. I joined the Navy under the Warfare Act, did a stint in the Navy, ended up going Army OCS, and did some time in OCS. I forgoed my commission after graduating in 2004, but did 15 years and actually just went back in the reserve after a 7-year gap to finish up my last 4.5 now.
So it was still kind of biting at you that you had a little bit left in the tank. You wanted to get back and put the uniform on, or?
Yeah, when you look at all that time you committed to the uniform service and the service of the country, it was that block that was unchecked for me yet. And I thought that I had something to still give to the fight and pass on to the next generation of soldiers that led me to survive a combat zone for 9.5 years.
And tell us about your involvement then. I know you are, could call you an entrepreneur, a businessman, a salesman. You have your fingers in a lot of different pots. I know you work with nonprofits as well in the veterans community. So what's a project maybe you're working on currently, or a project that you've been involved with over the last several years?
Two my biggest passions is Operation Supply Drop, which is We Are OSD. Glenn and I met the same time you and I met when you had us run on that panel. And we hit it off, and we just got to know each other more. I actually met Mike McKim, who's the chairman of the board as well. He's an entrepreneur, owns Cuvée Coffee, Navy veteran, so we won't hold it against him. But we just clicked, and we realized we could bring a lot of strength to the community and serve the men and women and their families when they got out of military service.
So what makes you most optimistic? You've served your country, you're continuing to do that. You've been involved with the veterans community here in Texas, especially here in Central Texas. For our audience, when they hear about difficult and sad times in the veterans community, they hear about suicide, depression, anxiety, maybe drug or alcohol addiction.
Yeah.
Those are parts of the conversation that have really consumed the narrative around veterans. But I know you are somebody who is optimistic about veteran involvement in our communities.
Yeah.
So what is it either about the veteran themselves or about the veterans community that you feel optimistic about here in Texas?
So Texas is probably most the ideal state to ever decide to put on the uniform. You come home to a little different environment. But even though with that to consider, there's still some things that we're lacking. What I loved about our generation of veterans is we learned from the Vietnam era, we learned from the Gulf War era, and we decided that if our federal government isn't going to take care of us, we would take care of each other. And I've dove in head first. I went through that dark age of survival guilt, wondering why did I lose 43 friends? Why did I lose relatives? Sadly, I lost a cousin who was part of the 101st on the first invasion to Iraq. He was one of 2 individuals who survived in his platoon, and he had his life ahead of him. He was at College Station, and he decided one night that him and his friend that they'd take their own lives. Mm-hmm. That really kick-started me even more. I went from just helping out our digital heroes to Operation Supply Drop to I expanded to Project K9 Heroes, Project K9 Hero, and Bunker Labs as well, where I do a CEO mentor circle with Jonathan and Sabrina, who are phenomenal executive directors here in Austin, Texas, which help bring Army Futures Command to Texas.
Yes.
And then most recently in Georgetown, we helped Georgetown become the capital of the United States for Purple Heart. And we're doing a Purple Heart integration project there, where we take veterans who are suffering from mental disabilities or struggles at this time, drug dependencies, physical rehab, and we're going to build a state-of-the-art facility to house 70 veterans on 17 acres there.
That is absolutely incredible, and it actually touches on a conversation that we had at this table just several weeks ago. And I want to go back to your work with Our Digital Heroes, because something that I've been thinking about is trying to push out within the veterans community and throughout communities across Texas, is that despite whether a physical injury, TBI, or maybe emotional or psychological hurdles after leaving the service, or disabilities,
yes,
you were able to provide jobs for those veterans suffering from those difficult circumstances. What's your message to veterans who may be coming back and are trying to find a place, in the workforce or a place in their community?
That there's many organizations, and I've chose some that are highly ethical. They use most of the money that's given, about above 85% or more is for the intended use. And Our Digital Heroes is when I first jumped into it. And Our Digital Heroes, we're getting men and women, we're getting them educational paths for IT degrees and certifications at no cost. And that's even if they've exhausted their Hazelwood Act or exhausted their GI Bill, post 9/11 GI Bill, that we want to get them to a skill set that's highly demanded. And so that Our Digital Heroes, we were able to get individuals trained, certified, and get them job placement. OSD does some of the similar things as well. Bunker Labs does. But OSD is we've made so many connections within Amazon, Intel, Samsung, Apple, Facebook, here in Central Texas alone, just on those relationships, Microsoft in Seattle, where if you want to find job placement, we will assist you in getting that hopefully mid-level or higher job. Not this entry-level job that pays $32,000 a year, but get a job set that correlates to what your experiences are when you're in uniform. People don't understand, some of the employers don't understand the amount of responsibility the men and women have when, just as an E5. It's like a project manager. A PMP certification should be given to them.
And they're 22, 23, 24, yes. Very, very, very young. That also touches on a conversation that we've had here, and me and you had off camera, about maybe men and women who are leaving the service, and maybe it's not necessarily a disability that they've encountered during the service, but maybe it's actually guilt that somebody in their platoon, in their unit, who was killed in combat, does not have the same opportunity to wake up in the morning and have a cup of coffee and kiss their wife and go about their day here in a beautiful place like Austin or Houston or Dallas. And I think sometimes veterans can feel like, why am I getting to enjoy this day-to-day life? And what am I supposed to do with the time that I have when I feel so much sadness and grief that it's been taken away from someone else? And my message to veterans, and what I hope is put out there into the community, is that you're still young, you still have so much more to give, and you should be living your life in a way that will make your fallen service members proud. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know that kind of ties into the Our Digital Heroes piece as well.
You said it well. I was sitting there wallowing in my own guilt, not understanding what I was having to face in life. Why did I survive and not my friends? And my dad was faced that when I was 16. He was hit by an 18-wheeler, and he would struggle. He said, "What is my purpose?" And so 18 years later, I was able to relate to my father. I was able to go, what is my purpose? And I figured it out. What I needed to do was live life to the absolute most fulfillment and purpose, that I needed to exhaust every minute of the day with completing a mission or objectives, exactly what we were taught in uniform. And if I wasn't doing that, I was doing a disservice to my fallen fellow soldiers.
Yeah.
That was the way I can honor them.
That was similar to what I was thinking as well.
Yeah.
And I think maybe, well, let me ask you, how long did it take for you to come to the realization that you could live in a manner that was honoring to them and that it was okay to do that? Was it kind of a light bulb moment, or was it more of it took a while to settle in, it took a while for you to get comfortable with it?
It took a while to get comfortable, but there was the aha moment. And that's where Sam Brown, she saw I was kind of in a dark spot. She said, "I want you to come out and do this hike."
Silky's hike, right?
I did a Silky hike with irreverent warriors. And there was Air Force guy driving, so it went from 22 kilometers to he actually drove, I think, 14.6 miles, and I was like, that's a big difference. But I was out of shape. I did it while everybody else was having a good time at the stops that we were doing.
Yeah.
I was going to sleep on the ground, kicking my feet up.
Yeah.
But along the hike, when we're suffering, which that's the one thing that veterans do well, is we suffer well
together, right? Yeah.
I realized that I wasn't the only one. I realized that there was individuals that were kind of struggling with the same predicament. And I met this gentleman, Ed, out of Seguin, and he's a crane operator, and he's operating here in Austin. He's making a great salary. And he actually lined up a pathway to get people the same certification to go make that six-figure salary being a crane operator. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. He's doing something that's in his wheelhouse of comfort, and he's compounding it. So why am I feeling sorry for myself when I need to try to find that purpose? And so I woke up. Next day, I was probably hungrier than anybody you'd ever know. That I was going to achieve success, and it was going to be a benefit to my community, because I don't believe in vet victims, and I don't believe in vet entitlement. So if I don't believe in it for myself, then I was going to give the avenue for other veterans to find that success too, not based off entitlement, not based off of vet victim.
Yeah. So let me change the conversation a little bit here. So we've talked about your veterans experience personally, what you've seen in the veterans community, the importance of community to you to get you kind of back on your feet. I would say I had a similar circumstance when I jumped into, I'll call it being like a fish back in the water. When I jumped back in with the SVA, there were people there who spoke the same language, who knew what it was like to go to boot camp, understood what it was like to deploy, understood what it was like to come home. And I think just knowing that existed, and then that I wasn't the only one struggling. I didn't have to be there 100 hours a week. I just had to be there occasionally.
Yes.
And I say, hey, I'm not an oddball. What I'm going through, other veterans are going through that too.
Yeah.
And it gave me an opportunity to say, this isn't out of the norm, but I can continue on a path to transition back into society without being like Sergeant Hamilton. I could just be Dan now.
Yes.
But again, let me go back to your business acumen. What do you think is the greatest strength you have, maybe personally or in your business as an entrepreneur?
The veteran community the last 15 years have been the most successful small business owners demographic. And the reason why is because we're giving all of the skill sets to achieve success. When I go up to Fort Hood and do the Pathfinder program with USO, and we mentor them to find their next chapter of life, because that's what I try to tell them.
Can I pause you real quick? For the audience who may not be aware of the Pathfinder program, tell us a little bit about that, and then I'll let you continue.
So the Pathfinder program USO created in the last couple of years. It used to be called TAPS when I was in, but the Pathfinder program is a lot better than that. Pathfinder program helps a soldier transition, as well as their family. Their family can go through the program, transition to civilian life. And that's finding a home to live, finding understanding how to be an entrepreneur, getting a small business loan, and getting into college, finding that next step. And we, Jonathan and I are Glenn as well, we're big advocates of saying you're not retired from the military, or you're not defined by only being a military member. You're gonna go write your next chapter.
Yeah.
And being a soldier, I was able to use those skill sets that I tell everybody. I'm like, go up there and write 5-paragraph op order. Go up there and write troop leading procedures. And then I'll write a business plan, just the bullet points in between. And when they say enemy terrain, or the terrain and battlefield, I'm like, market assessment. And they're like, enemy, I'm like, competitor. And when I start doing that and translate both of those things that you're just ingrained to know in the military, you could see that light bulb kick off going, wow, I know how to do this. I'm
awesome.
Like, yes, you do.
So you are going up, to go back to your greatest asset as an entrepreneur, what you feel most comfortable doing. You did this Pathfinder program, but I'll allow you to take it from there.
What I feel most comfortable doing is using those strengths that the military gave me. I'm just relentless. You know, I'm not in just one industry. I'm in multiple industries, but I'm utilizing the same base. And so my learning curve as an entrepreneur is a lot smaller. Yes, there weren't all successes, there were some failures, but I recovered well, because in the military you have to pivot, you have to scale in reaction to your adversary, to reaction of the combat field, and that's because we had no choice. You have no choice in Iraq and Afghanistan except to adapt and overcome and complete the objective. Well, when you're not getting shot at or blown up, man, it's pretty peaceful.
It's not bad, right?
So entrepreneur life isn't that stressful.
Yeah.
It's stressful, but it's not that stressful.
Yeah.
And so when I realized that, my learning curve was a lot faster. I was able to recognize how to be successful faster and capitalize on those opportunities when they came about. Minimize my risks and my failures, and increase my successes and capitalize on those.
Where do you want to grow?
You know, as an individual.
And it may be, I was going to say, and it doesn't necessarily have to be professionally. Yeah. So the conversations that we have here, I hope that the audience is able to say, hey, these are professional or personal lessons that even if I'm not a veteran, I can still apply to my life. I can now maybe relate to veterans in my classroom. I can now relate to veterans in my workplace. Yeah. So feel free to move a little bit outside of the veterans bubble per se. It can be anything that you've just been, an idea that you've been working on in your head, something that you want to grow on, maybe even a New Year's resolution as we're in the middle of 2019, but something that you're just kind of interested in, an area you're trying to grow.
Two things. I guess one is personal life. You know, when you're deployed, your family sacrifices from your absence. That includes my whole family. I have nieces and nephews that I need to know better, and they're going off to college, and so I'm trying to become a better contributor to my family unit. Now that I have a significant other in my life, I want to hopefully be a better husband. I want to be a better father when that time comes. And so if I put just as much energy into that and have that work-life balance, I think I hope I could succeed at that.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, I consider the same thing too, and I think maybe as you get older, you to some degree you start to realize what's most important in life. Yeah. And I think certainly for veterans, you may have learned the value of life early because of, as you talked about, the responsibilities. But it's definitely something, you know, with the hustle and bustle and, you know, trying to be here and trying to have this responsibility, that sometimes family, which is should be the most important thing for all of us, is actually something that gets almost delayed or pushed back. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something I have to continuously remind myself as well, because, you know, we get busy and then we forget that our primary commitment, you know, not just to us, maybe your faith, but also to your spouse and your family. And that's crucial too, I think, for the mental health aspect for veterans. Can you talk about the importance of family in those terms?
Well, the two leading causes to veteran suicide is job satisfaction and home satisfaction. And so the organizations that I contribute to as either executive or board member, address both of those, because we understand that that's what leads to the 20 reservists and veterans that commit suicide, and the 2 active duty reservists as well. That's 22 a day. That's not acceptable to me. And so to me, if I can satisfy your job satisfaction and address your home satisfaction as well with any of the organizations, I want to help somebody have a hand up, not a handout, because it was given to me. I was able to get my success because somebody took time out of their day and said, let me help you up.
Who's someone you look up to?
Probably the 3 biggest people is Sam Brown, Jonathan at Bunker Labs, and Glenn at OSD. We are OSD. Glenn is a phenomenal human being who's a great father. He's addressing medical concerns in his home life. He's just an all-star. Jonathan will work 22 hours a day, burning the candle at every end, trying to help others. And Sabrina is right there with him, and they're raising kids. Sam, she has such a giant heart that she took time when she was working for a congressman to help me, and she does that continuously in her present job. And San Marcos, and those people, it's funny when they turn around to me and give me opportunities to speak at locations as a mentor. I'm like, well, I thought you were my mentor. Yeah. And they're like, no, Austin, you're a peer. And I was like, thank you. And it made me feel like, wow, I'm bringing just as much value as I see them bringing to the table.
When you look back from your departure from the service, although you've gone back in as a reserve role, but when you think back on your transition before you got out, what do you think are some lessons that you could provide for somebody on active duty trying to prepare for the next chapter? And I know you talked a little bit about the Pathfinder program, but if you could tell somebody maybe who's been in for a decade, hey, start the year or 2 prior, or 6, 8, 12 months prior to getting out, what would you tell them?
Well, first, save. At least when I got out of the Navy the first time before I went to college, I had $15,000 in the savings. I had my car paid off. So a lot of times what happens is these young men and women come out and they have a ridiculous amount of debt. I'm like, just save while you're in. It's short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. And if you want to be an entrepreneur and forgo going to college, then start understanding the industry that you want to go in that environment, and utilize the resources that are out there. I mean, Bunker Labs is a phenomenal resource for entrepreneurs in that ecosystem that they've created with venture capitalists, experienced CEOs, and they put them all in the same room. So you're in the best incubator to go and find success by watching people who have done it. I mean, you've got George Rice down in McAllen, Texas, who's probably going to be the largest distributor for veteran-owned brewery in Texas. And phenomenal human being. You've got Samantha Snabs did RE3D, and she was the most expensive item for a GoFundMe fundraising campaign, and she had more corporate donations from all over the world than any other GoFundMe campaign. And I mean, the list goes on. Anthony Williams at HD TV, he's doing. I deployed with him in Iraq, and the guy's on TV flipping houses, and he's gone into commercial property. And so those are the people I'm trying to keep up or catch, because they're all stars.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, just to wrap up the conversation, I want to thank you for your continued service. Obviously, just an incredible example for, I think, people across Texas. When we sit at this table, we have an opportunity to provide a voice for veterans so that they can tell their own story across any industry. And I appreciate you coming in, give us a little insight to your struggle, hopefully being able to relate to veterans out there. For people who would like to keep up with you, see how business is going, and even see how that training is going. Now that you're back in the service, what are some of the social media handles you can follow, or even for some of your businesses as well?
You can go to Austin Talley, that's Talley @.com. That's my PR page. It has a lot of links to the nonprofits that I help. AustinTalley.tx on pretty much all the social media across the board. You'll find me, and I welcome any interaction. I'm here to help you, and just remember, don't quit and put one foot in front of the other.
On that note, I want to thank you for watching us. Thank you for being a dedicated audience. Thank you for continuing to support veteran success like Austin Talley here in the great state of Texas. If you enjoy what you're hearing, if you like being a part of our audience, please give us a like, please give us a share, tell your friends and family. We love seeing how many people that this program is able to touch. I would also like to thank the folks behind the camera who have worked so diligently over the past month or so to get the equipment set up, to work on our marketing. There are a lot of hands that go into making a great project to tell the success stories of Texas veterans. On behalf of Chairman George P. Bush, the Veterans Land Board, my name is Dan Hamilton. We'll see you next time. Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior Podcast.